Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Hamp, and with me is Scott Harwell. Hey, we've got a theologian and a lawyer. What could go wrong, right? Yeah, but we have a lot of fun every week. We do not claim to have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, but we do promise an insightful and entertaining conversation about the end times. And today, because of all the things that are happening, especially think Israel and Gaza and Hamas and those kinds of things, we thought we would kind of revisit this topic that we've talked about a few times here and there. But could it be that there are Jewish only end times prophecies that maybe are being fulfilled right now? All right, and we're going to take a look at some things. Now, some of the things that Scott and I have talked about on the show over the last couple of years since we've been doing this is this massive, mind-blowing revelation. All right, and when you first hear it, you're like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound so mind-blowing. It's not like Nephilim or UFOs or those kinds of things. But if you're interested in prophecy, and if you're watching the show, you're probably interested in prophecy. If you want to understand how the pieces fit together, there's been a missing piece in the puzzle that, because we didn't have it, we just couldn't figure out how to put this thing together. And then we had to go all the way back, and then we could begin to understand a bunch of cool stuff. And what is that missing piece, Scott? Well, the missing piece, of course, is that we're talking about the house of Israel and the house of Judah. That right there. And I want to take us over to a passage that we've looked at a few times. I actually want to start in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 12. Now, here it's talking about something that's going to come about in the end times, and God is saying that, Isaiah speaking here, obviously on behalf of God, he's saying he will set up a banner for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah, right, and the four corners of the earth. Now, he set up a banner for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel. Now, this word here, nations, in the Hebrew is the word goyim, or Gentiles, and he's going to assemble the outcasts of Israel. Now, notice that this right here is in contradiction, or in contrast, I should say, to the dispersed of Judah. But then look down below. And the envy of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. So now we see that the nations and the outcasts of Israel are contrasted with Judah. So Ephraim is the same as the nations and the outcasts of Israel. Now, people might say, okay, what's the big deal? Why is that such a major revelation? It doesn't seem very exciting, or, whatever, right? But understanding this distinction, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this has led both of us in our own ways to say, oh my goodness, right? There's some stuff that really has come into focus since we started taking a look at this. And so now we want to look at some prophecies. We're going to look at Zechariah 12 tonight and many other passages that are just for the house of Israel and not necessarily for
house of Judah.
The house of Judah, excuse me. Yes, just for the house of Judah and not necessarily for the house of Israel. So your thoughts. And of course, we have Maria on with us as well to help us investigate this topic. So we're glad that she could make it at the last minute. We're so glad you could be here, Maria.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
and that next passage, Doug, that is sort of what we're talking about right now. If you could pull it up. Also, the envy of Ephraim shall depart. The adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim. We're going to talk about both that envy and that harassing. I mean, and we talked about this before we got on, and Maria and I have talked about this before. There is a small element, before I get to that part, but this envy, what I'm seeing increasing exponentially within the Hebrew uprooter movement. And I say that in
translation, Hebrew root people, for maybe what Scott, people
exactly, and somewhat in the messy antics movement. and I see why there that and it's not new. It's just, it's off the chain right now. At least what I'm seeing on social media. I don't know anybody.
Let's define these terms for people that maybe don't know what we're talking about. Some people think that I'm Hebrew roots, and I don't agree with that term. So maybe can you define those, Scott?
Well, I mean, it would be individuals like myself. And again, I don't like the labels either, but it's people that now do understand that they are grafted into Israel, into that singular olive tree, and that they are Israel. Not now we none of us are talking anything about replacing Judah or at all, but that we're grafted into Israel per Ephesians 2:11. We are now citizens of Israel. Some people like the term Commonwealth. I think that's too weak. We are citizens of Israel, but sort of to the topic tonight, a lot of these individuals, and some of it comes from conspiracy theory type stuff, which has a lot of truth to it. They are now claiming that the current, I'm going to use their language, the current Zionist state in Israel has nothing to, that's currently in Israel right now, the land, has nothing to do with prophecy, nothing really to do with anything, that this is all a Illuminati global conspiracy to take over the world, and that it was all set up by the Rothschilds and, some elite families, and this has always been their plan to concoct this in an effort to one day rule the world. In other words, a one world government. And again, some of the things that they're saying are very correct, but it's as if they forgot that God can use a pagan king like Cyrus to effectuate his plan and put Judah back in the land.
Yeah, let me go back, because I think that we sometimes assume. I mean, we have a very intelligent audience. I don't want to downplay that at all. However, sometimes these things take a while. It took me a long time to kind of figure out all of the pieces. All right, so a really quick summary. All right, so God brings Israel into the land. Some centuries go by. You got King David, you got King Solomon. Solomon goes from bad to worse, and then God says, okay, that's it. I'm going to take away Israel from you, Solomon. But because of David, your father, I'm going to leave a remnant with you. So 2 tribes get to stay with Solomon, and the 10 tribes, Israel, are given to this dude named Jeroboam. All right. And he's an Ephraimite. That's important. All right. And then, so that's about 932 BC. And then that goes from bad to worse. And then about 722 BC, God brings in the Assyrians under Sennacherib II, and they take the 10 tribes, they take them out of the land, and they do a little switcheroo. Okay, so that they take the people out of the area of Israel, Ephraim, Samaria. Okay, all those are sort of interchangeable. They take those people and they put them in Babylon, and they take the people from Babylon, they put them over in Samaria. All right, so that's around 722 BC, roughly. And God says, I'm divorcing you, it's over. But he also says, but I'm going to bring you back to me. But the problem is, where did they go? They went into the nations. They were assimilated. It's just like when you take some creamer and you put it in your coffee. If the house of Israel is the creamer and the world is the coffee, we know where the creamer went, but there's, good luck getting it back. Right? It's now part of the admixture. That's just how it is. All right. And so God says he's going to bring this back. Now, the problem that we've often faced, this is what I grew up with, is what I heard, some very good, reputable scholars, and they're saying, oh no, Jews or Israel, the Jews. That is what I heard all the time. And so I would be reading, the prophets and whatnot, and I couldn't make sense of it, because I'm like, I couldn't see the distinction. All right. But now that I can see the distinction between the house of Israel and the house of Judah, though it's everywhere in the Bible, frankly, but now that I understand it theologically, I'm like, oh my goodness. Right. And this is all about the new covenant. This is all about God putting the 2 sticks back together. This makes sense of so many things that the Apostle Paul spoke of. All right. So that's just kind of a little bit of the backstory that we're talking about. Now, for the Hebrew rooters, as Scott likes to call them, these are people that, so many years ago or last week, whatever, they're like, oh my goodness, I just discovered that
I'm an Israelite.
part of Israel. Okay. and in their zeal, in their passion, many times what they do is they start saying, I have every right. I, as that person, as an individual citizen, I have every right to the nation of Israel, the modern state of Israel. And I should be able to walk over there and they should let me in. It's not going to happen. right? And they often start to sort of take on some things that are not so pleasant. They have an attitude sometimes. They also have a rather dim view and opinion of the house of Judah, that is the Jews.
You're being nice for some of these people.
Well, I'm always trying to be nice.
They're anti-Semites, and they would make Hitler, Constantine, the popes, the Inquisitioners, and Martin Luther proud. Okay, they're calling them fake Jews. They're calling them the synagogue of Satan, and it's as if they've never read Romans 11, and they're a bunch of arrogant jerks. And I'm being nice when I say jerks. It's like they got hit by the stupid olive stick. You know, they're grafted into the tree, and all of a sudden, I guess there's some dumb sticks that hit them upside the head.
Can I interject something?
Yeah,
please,
go ahead.
Please. I was just going to say that.
So yeah, I think this is what I've observed, because I came into Torah around 2002 after the 9/11 events, and I saw this progression. You know, I thought I was the only one for the first 5 years. I thought I was the only one keeping Shabbat all by myself, keeping the feasts all by myself in my house, just inviting a couple friends over for Bible study, you know, trying to do the best I could. And then I saw that like around 2005, 2006, that's when all of a sudden there was like this explosion of people that started coming out of the church and recognizing, oh, we're supposed to be keeping Shabbat. We're supposed to be keeping, you know, the feast days. And so what I noticed that a lot of these people are going out and buying a prayer shawl and a shofar and just dressing up like a Jew and acting like a Jew. And they were just basically embracing all things Jewish, right? But they went so far with it that they were even embracing people like this John Hagee guy who says, you know, he believes in what's called the dual covenant theology. Like, oh, if you're Jewish, you don't need, you know, I'm quoting him. You don't need Jesus to be saved. You can just be saved by obeying the Torah, right? But if you're Christian, you don't need to obey the Torah. But if you're Jewish, you don't need Jesus. You just, you know, so basically he's acting like there's two different sets of rules. There's one set of rules for the Jews and another set of rules for the Christians. And
many Messianic Judaism congregations teach that still, that you
Gentiles, I've met them. Yeah.
That you Gentiles, y'all don't need to keep Shabbat or the feast. That's that's Jewish. And again, that irritates me, but I'm not going to hate on them for it. I'm going to go, I'm sorry, I'm busting the doors down.
Right, exactly. But see, they've cloaked this with, they don't come out and say it, but what they're basically teaching is the 7 Noahide Laws, which the 7 Noahide Laws, if anybody knows anything about that, you know, I have this blog I wrote where I show George H.W. Bush signing this into Congress in 1993. And it actually says in the Talmud, if any non-Jew violated one of the 7 Noahide Laws, he's liable of death by decapitation. So,
well, I mean, that's not entirely accurate. I mean, that was I think Maimonides that was sort of pondering what would happen in the age to come, and because the penalty for a Jew to break Torah, you know, on a capital offense would be stoning, he was thinking, well, you know, it's probably a nicer way to go for a Gentile would be beheading. All right. So,
I've actually looked at this, and I'm telling you that they do plan to decapitate. That's why that we actually have guillotines.
I would strongly disagree with that, Maria. I would really strongly disagree.
That's fine. I mean, you invited me to be a guest.
I know,
so I'm just telling
and that's all part of the fun. Keep going. I'm still going to push back though.
I do believe that they're planning, the Illuminati are planning a genocide of anyone who calls themselves a Christian or a Messianic or a Hebrew roots person or a Nazarene. And they're going to use these Noahide laws. And this was passed in our United States Congress. United States Congress officially recognized the Noahide laws in legislation that was passed by both houses, Congress and the President of the United States.
Yeah, but it had, listen, I did a bunch of research on this too. And I stand strongly against this idea that the Noahide laws are somehow in effect in the United States.
They're
All right.
not.
I heard this nonsense taught years ago, and it really
They're
pissed
not
me
in
off.
effect.
Okay. It really did. And it pissed me off. And I use that.
It's not an effect. It's not an effect yet, but it's kind of like on the back burner.
No, it's not.
I
It's simply,
disagree.
it's, well, okay, we're allowed to disagree, and that's part of the fun we have on the show. Okay. But I'm going to push back on you, because the Noahide laws were recognized, not as any kind of law here in the United States, but that was basically the United States government saying, okay, we recognize that. Thank you. All right. Just like you might have somebody come from another country and say, here's how we do things in our country. And the US government says, okay, thank you for sharing that. All right. It's a little bit of show and tell. All right. But as far as the Noahide laws somehow pushing some agenda to lop off heads is not true. All right. So again,
I've got the PDF file right here, and it actually says this public law designated March 26, 1991. They call it Education Day, but every president since Jimmy Carter has signed off on this and has affirmed the Noahide laws. Now, I'm going to read this. This is from the Mishnah, Torah, Law of Kings 8:10. It says, to this obligation to teach all the peoples of the earth about the laws of Noah is incumbent upon every individual in every era. And then here, they're quoting Deuteronomy 33:4. It says, Gentiles may not be taught the Torah. Well, it doesn't even say that in Deuteronomy 33:4, but they're using Deuteronomy 34 as their so-called proof text.
But it says, I'll say this real quick, Maria. On the flight over, it was like a divine appointment. I had a 3-hour conversation with an Orthodox Jew. He was from Venezuela. He was studying Talmud at the largest Jewish Talmud school, or Torah. He called it a Torah school in New Jersey. He told me so many times that I'm not to keep Shabbat, I'm not to keep the feast, that I don't have to. That's only for Jews, and I should not keep them. So again, there is, and we're talking about tonight more trying to come against the nonsense in which every Jew is getting lumped into this conspiracy theory.
Right.
This Illuminati global elite plan. I'm not saying that the elites at the upper levels of Catholicism, Islam, and even the higher ups in Judaism, and some of those that are pure evil and are Luciferians, obviously we know there's going to be a global one world government. We know there's going to be beheadings of, as you said, the Nazarene, the Christians, the Messianics.
Right.
And how they put that into effect. But again, what I'm seeing right now is some of this information, which is correct, is now being applied to practically every citizen in the state of Israel, every Jew there, and
right,
globally.
Exactly.
And that's the danger without placing blame where blame it should be, which is, and I'm going to make a symbol of it at the top of this pyramid. In other words, at the upper levels, they know who they serve. But your average rabbi, now he's probably been taught, no, we shouldn't keep the Sabbath, or things of that nature. But there's still other Jews. My friend Jeff, he quoted a rabbi that said, when the nations start to keep the Shabbat, we'll know that Messiah is close to coming. So again, we're seeing prophecy fulfilled. That those of us of the nations that now understand that we're Israel, and we go back and we read those commandments which are made to Israel, and we don't go, oh, well, that's just for the Jews.
But let me finish quoting this out of the Talmud. It says in Sanhedrin 59a, it says, R. Yohanan says one of one such teaching, such a person deserves death. It's like placing an obstacle before the blind. And then it says, a Gentile observing the Sabbath deserves death. That's Sanhedrin 58b. All Gentiles found keeping the seventh-day Sabbath shall be found guilty of breaking the Noahide law and must be punished to the fullest, decapitation. No Gentile shall be permitted to speak Hashem, the name of Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. All who have blasphemy and are found guilty of breaking the Noahide law shall be punished to the fullest, decapitation. Now, this is straight out of the Talmud. So you can disagree as much as you want, but it says what it actually
I'm not going to
says.
disagree with you. I'm going to give you an example of Martin Luther would be what I call Christian Talmud. This was one rabbi's out of the Talmud is huge. I mean, I could point up to all my
Oh, I
books,
know.
and you know that. But again, a lot of these ignorant Hebrew uprooters, messianics, don't know. They don't even understand what the Talmud is. The same ones that'll quote the horrendous passages out of the Talmud applying to Yeshua. It's very limited. So, and again, it's just rabbinic commentary on scripture. Now, where their error is exactly what Yeshua condemned them for. They have elevated Talmud to, or if not above, Torah, and above the scriptures. And again, all that is true. But for some, and Doug and I talked about it before we got on. Doug, who has caused this? Is it not our Creator that He says He's the one that has done it?
All I'm trying to say is that it's this kind of stuff, which I totally believe that there are, what people need to understand is that, and I know you're going to disagree with me, Doug, but I mean, why even invite me on if everything I say is going to get nixed? You know what I mean?
Nobody's nixing you.
I'm just saying, it's like, I got to say what's on my mind,
We'll say it.
The Jesuits of Rome have a secret blood oath, and they actually say in their secret blood oaths that they will infiltrate and go in and pretend to be a Baptist minister, or they will go into a church and pretend to be a Pentecostal minister. And they say, we will even go so low as to pretend to be a Jew so that we can do nefarious things in the name of, under the guise of being a Jew, and we can give the Jews a bad name. So when, a lot of these people, these, Hollywood power Jews, like for instance, George Soros, and, you got Steven Spielberg and all these, Harvey Weinsteins of the world and Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, those people, even if they are ethnically Jewish, they've sold out to the Vatican and the Illuminati, all in exchange for power and wealth. So they might be ethnically Jewish, but they're
Maria, but we're talking about the average Jew tonight. And
I know.
What we're talking about is that's not even the topic. The topic is prophecies. Let me finish. The topic is prophecies that are essentially related just to the house of Judah and the rise of anti-Semitism. And again, we've got to get in the other part of this, or if somebody listening to this right now, they would think that you're promoting hate all Jews because of the Noahide laws and all this other stuff. Because you haven't said anything positive about Judah yet. You haven't.
What I'm trying to say is it's because of this kind of thing that people have gotten the memo in the Hebrew roots movement or the Netzerim movement or wherever you want to call it. They're lumping everybody in now.
Oh, I agree. And now,
so what I'm trying
to got that focused on, let's talk about Zechariah 12 and 14 and how we cannot blame every person that says they're a Jew, calls them a fake Jew, because of what's happening at the top. We're all in agreement on that. I think Doug would agree with you on that part.
Yeah, absolutely.
I brought this up for the purpose of understanding that the reason why people are starting to become so anti-Jew is because all of this conspiracy stuff is coming out in the open now. And even though I agree with much of it, they're taking it too far. Okay, so that's why I brought all this. That's why I brought this up. I'm not talking negatively about Judah. I'm saying the Jesuits of Rome are behind this. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, I didn't hear that at the beginning, so
yeah.
Glad you clarified.
It just takes a while.
Yeah, it's just that if I get interrupted,
could have led with that.
Yeah, maybe
if I get interrupted mid sentence, I never get to give you the complete
discussion. You can interrupt me too.
Yeah. Well, it definitely is a discussion. So I'm glad you clarified. And I've heard it very much used against Judah to say that, you know, they're going to be the ones that are going to do all these things. And I think it's completely out of context. I've read those same passages myself, and you know, they were talking about what will happen in the millennium, in the age to come, when under the Messiah, the ideal conditions, everyone's living according to Torah, right? This is all hypothetical. And I think it's Maimonides or Rambam, and I can't remember which one, but you know, he's speculating as to what will happen in the age to come if a Gentile at that time, with Messiah present, breaks the commandments. Then what will happen? All right. And so that hypothetical conversation with himself is then being used by others. And I heard some guys a couple of years ago that were taking this idea of the Noahide laws, and you know, they're, you know, that the Jews are somehow scheming to try to take off heads in the end times, which is just nonsense. It's completely taken out of context. So it sounds like we agree that, you know, these kinds of texts that are taken out of the Talmud are being twisted by many people. And the point that we're trying to really address this evening is that it's very unfortunate that there are many within the Hebrew roots and some Messianics, Torah keepers, etc., who kind of run with these little snippets, these sound bites, and then they try to make these big generalized accusations against Judah. You know, we're very much standing for Judah.
Well, towards every Jew, and that's my point. Or you've got this guy, and again, I like a lot of what he teaches. I'll say his channel, it's Truth Unedited. He teaches a lot of good stuff, but he has fallen prey to this Black Hebrew Israelite research,
right,
in which he's now teaching that every person who says they're a Jew that's not African is a fake Jew. Only the Africans are the true Jews and the true Israelites. It's as if Hosea 8:8 only says Israel or Ephraim will be swallowed up by these southern nations. You know, as if there's a direction there. And I think and I've tried to reach out to him. It's like he's ignorant, and he's not being mean toward all Jews. He has the same kind of understanding you and I do, Maria, about this upper echelon level and the plan, you know, for a one world government, and how the Zionist state could be used in that plan. Then you read Albert Pike's letter last week, and how this would all be used as part of a way to create such chaos that order could come out of it, where they could reunite Babel. But what he's done is, and again, he is not teaching that us white people can't be saved and grafted in, but that and it's sort of like some of the Messianic Jewish congregations that okay, well, you can be a believer and you can be grafted in, but you're still a goy. You're still ethnos. It's only the African Jews, the African Israelites that are the true chosen people. And Doug and I talked about this, and I see it on Facebook, and this is where I'm holding my pen, I'm holding my tongue. But when I do see Christian Zionists, dispensationalists, Pentecostals, Baptists, those are generally the denominations that talk about the Jews being God's chosen people. What I want to say is, you are correct, but in other words, some of this that looks like support actually brings on, it can bring on discrimination, because although it's true that Judah is chosen and they're part of the chosen people and they are part of Abraham's seed, I just see these passages taken so out of context by well-meaning Christians, saying that it's only the Jews that are the chosen people. And again, hear me out. I believe they're part of this equation. Obviously, they were two tribes. Most of Levi moved down to Judah after Jeroboam committed apostasy and set up his own priesthood and everything. They're like, no, we're out of here. Most of Simeon was already living in Judah. And Chronicles records that the other tribes that didn't want to participate in the apostate system of Jeroboam, they migrated south and strengthened Judah. So Judah really consisted of all the tribes. It was just a minority of those that were the true followers of Yah that migrated south. And so again, we're all a bunch of mutts. But anytime you get into this DNA racism stuff, whether it be British Israelitism, African only Judah Israelitism, or there's even some Native Americans teaching that they're only the true Israelites. There's Asians, Filipinos that teach this. And it's just, it's sort of like the enemy. People are understanding now that they're Israel. And of course, the enemy's going to come in and he's going to use color and race and different cultures and everything. And, oh, well, we're the true Israel. Oh, we're the true Israel. We're the true Jews. No, it's all part of his plan to foster this division. But I'm just seeing the fake Jew memes, the fake Jew. It's like they don't have context. They got hit.
No, they don't. No, everybody's like a parrot. They just repeat what someone else says, and then it just becomes like this. They're just like a bunch of talking little parrots. Like little, just repeating what other people say, and they don't even have the correct background that goes with it. You know what I mean? But it's like, just what you were saying is that they're just spewing out these little sound bites, and there's no context.
Or there's, and again, there could be some little partial truth to it. And
right.
yet, and there could be a complete whole truth to it at the upper echelons, the elite level, sort of like a Roman Catholic. In other words, I believe that the Pope and those at the upper levels of Roman Catholicism, they know who they really worship. But I'm not applying that to every priest, and certainly not to everybody in the Catholic Church, the millions of Catholics around the world, saying that they're part of this big Jesuit, Pope conspiracy to take over the world and restore the Holy Roman Empire to where if we don't worship as Rome says, we get killed. I mean, so Roman Christianity is just as guilty, is actually guilty of what people are trying to say that the Jews are going to do with these Noahide laws. I mean,
well, yeah, I mean,
Rome says hi,
I mean, it started with Constantine's creed, where he basically said, I renounce all customs, rites, legalisms, unleavened breads, and sacrifices of lambs of the Hebrews, and all the other feasts of the Hebrews, yada, yada, yada. And basically
with the Jews.
Right. So, he started that, and then basically changed the resurrection day to Easter Sunday instead of, the Feast of First Fruits. And so that's been the MO of Roman Catholicism. And then, of course, even Hitler said that he was, in his Mein Kampf book, he said that he was following the protocols of the Jesuits for the past 1,500 years, when he agreed to signing the Reichsconcordat Act with Pope Pius, and that their goal was to exterminate all Jews. And so the whole thing is a Jesuit inspired conspiracy. It's not even a conspiracy. It's a fact. I mean, but I read this book years ago by Eric John Phelps called The Vatican Assassins, and he goes into a lot of detail. I mean, he shows the secret blood oaths of the Jesuits. And that's what I was starting to say, is that as much as I agree that these Jesuits are taking the Noahide laws and they're using those Noahide laws to their advantage, right? And so what they're doing is, like you said, they took snippets of what this rabbi said and what that rabbi said, and they're going to use that as their excuse to implement this genocide. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so then, in other words, the Christians are not going to be allowed to keep Shabbat, and only the Jews are going to be allowed to keep Shabbat. But it's all in this effort to get a stronghold into Jerusalem, which that's already started with the Oslo Accords in 1993, where even Shimon Peres handed over East Jerusalem to Pope John Paul II. And he divided up the city into 3 sections: the Jewish section, the Christian section, and the Muslim section. So, the Mother Harlot Church has already got a stronghold in Jerusalem now.
And having spent a lot of time in Jerusalem recently, yes, there is a bunch of Catholic sites. So you always have to pay to use their restrooms, by the way, too. They're gonna get their money out of you, even if it's to go pee. So.
Right. So the point I'm making is that it doesn't matter what nationality, like what origin you come from, because when it comes down to it, it says in Ezekiel 47:22 through 23, any stranger who wants to sojourn with any of the 12 tribes can, they shall be treated as one born into that tribe just by virtue of sojourning with, someone of that tribe. Like, as an example, Ruth, who was a Moabitess, she sojourned with her mother-in-law, Naomi, back to Bethlehem, Judah. And just by sojourning, she became a Yehudi, a Jew, And
Caleb was grafted into Judah.
Right.
That's my best example I can think of destroying this DNA argument on all sides. In other words, not as far as, not really the topic, but yes, if Jews do have this elitist, I'm a Jew and I'm better than you, because of who their mama was, which is actually, Doug and I talked about this, that's not biblical. It's based on your patriarchy, not the way Judah determined.
Right.
But Caleb's dad was a Kenizzite. And yet here we have Caleb, one of the only two to give a favorable report, that was not only an Israelite, he was even of the tribe of Judah, even though his dad was a Kenizzite.
Right.
But
I'm so tired of people saying, oh, the Jews that live there now, they're Khazars. I'm like, you know what? It doesn't even matter. If they've decided they want to start obeying the Torah and they want to follow Judah back to the land, according to Ezekiel 47:22 and 23, they shall be counted as one born into the tribe. So in the Father's eyes, it doesn't matter if they really are Khazars or if they really are Ashkenazis. It doesn't matter. Once they decide, like Ruth, I want to cross over and become one of you guys, then he has to recognize that.
That's a great point. I like that. Because I've heard that so many times, like everyone there is fake, and it drives me bananas because, here are people that have, they've taken on, let's call it the burden of being Jewish. It's not exactly easy in today's world to be Jewish. For like the last several thousand years, it's not been easy. And, during the Holocaust, there were many that said, I don't want to be Jewish. And they're like, nope, sorry, you can't leave. So it's not like, you sign on because you get all these amazing perks or something like that. And so I think it's great what you're saying, that, here are people, whether, it's a blood thing or not, they're saying, I want to be that. And so they're definitely in, and this is where we see this enmity between Judah and Ephraim, that's finally going to end when the Lord comes back. I wish it were sooner, but it's gonna, that enmity between these two. And once we understand that Ephraim, when we talk about Ephraim, we're talking principally about let's call them quote unquote Gentile Christians. Okay, these are people from the nations who are now believers in Yeshua the Messiah, and they are grafted in, even though they may not realize it, but they are actually grafted into the house of Israel. And they're often some of the worst haters against the house of Judah. And, I can hardly wait until the Lord comes back and we can finally have peace and stop, throwing stones at one another.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that what cracks me up about these people that they'll start out saying, oh, it's not about, DNA, it's about faith and obedience. But then they turn it around and say, oh, but the Jews that are there today are the fake Jews. They're the Khazars. And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought you just got done saying it's not about, DNA. Like in other words, they love to quote Romans chapter 2, 28 through 29, where Paul says, he is not a Jew who is one, outwardly, whose circumcision is of the flesh, but he is a Jew who is one inwardly, whose circumcision is of the heart. So they'll quote that. And I'm like, yeah, amen. Good. I agree with you. But then they'll turn around and say, oh, but the Jews that are there today, they're not the real Jews. They're Khazars. I'm like, but wait a minute. I thought you just got done saying it's not about, who is a Jew outwardly in the flesh. I thought you said it had to do with circumcision of the heart. So you're telling me it's impossible for any of those people that live there to become born again? Like, I mean, from what I hear from One for Israel Ministries, they've got this tremendous outreach. I mean, they're Jewish people themselves that are, born again, Messianics, and they're having a tremendous impact on Arabs and on Jews. And they've got this huge, amount of people coming into the faith because of that outreach that they have going on there. And scripture tells us 1/3 of the inhabitants of Jerusalem, it says in Zechariah chapter 13, 8 and 9, that 1/3 of the inhabitants of Jerusalem will be saved, that they're going to accept Messiah when he comes back. So who are we to decide? And this is what drives me nuts is you don't, unless you move there and do a DNA test on every single person that lives there. And unless you have a sit down interview with every single person that lives there to find out who's born again, unless you've done all that, you have no right to decide who's who, because you don't know. Only the Father knows.
Well, and Maria just touched on Zechariah, and that's sort of, I believe those are the passages which shows to me at least that the individuals that have been gathered back to the land now, or not gathered, but that through world events, through the efforts of Rothschild, through the efforts of some of these very, very wealthy families, and this Zionist plan to have a Jewish homeland, the nation of Israel, a Jewish state, was in fact established in 1948. And up until that point in time, and this is where I will agree with our Christian Zionist brothers, our dispensational brothers, that was a very significant event, because you have those passages, Maria, Zechariah 12, 13, and 14, those final 3 chapters, they could not have been fulfilled until at least 1948. They simply were not even in a position to be fulfilled yet.
Ezekiel 38 speaks about this. He's talking about a people brought back from the sword. Man, if the Holocaust doesn't qualify as the sword, I don't know what does. So you had to have some people in there, and then it actually makes a distinction. I mean, Ezekiel makes a huge distinction between the house of Israel and the house of Judah. The whole book is about that. If you miss that, you've missed the book of Ezekiel, right? You've got to understand that he's talking about these 2 houses, and it's there that we have the 2 sticks becoming 1 stick in God's hand, right? And then he talks about how he's going to deal with Judah and with Israel. And in Ezekiel 39, he's speaking specifically about the house of Israel, that they will no longer blaspheme his name. Right. So there's all these different things that have to happen. And I wanted to bring up Matthew 23, because I think this is another incredible passage that really is speaking specifically about the house of Judah. All right. So, in Matthew 23, Jesus is saying, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees." And, this whole chapter is about this. And then he says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. I wanted to gather you, but you didn't want to. So see, your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." All right. So who needs to say that? Right? Who are the people that are going to actually say that? I would argue it's going to be the house of Judah. Specifically, it's going to be the Sanhedrin, or whatever governing body is extant in our day, which there is some Sanhedrin that's coming about, but whoever is calling the shots, all right, someone's got to make the decision, because we know that in Jesus' day, right, what we call Palm Sunday, whatever you want to call it, but Jesus rides in on a donkey, and what are people doing? They got palm branches, and what are they saying to him? They're saying, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, right? Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So the masses were saying this in Jerusalem. These were Jews who were saying this. They were saying this to Jesus. But no, that didn't count. Jesus says to the leadership, the leadership, this corporate body called the leadership of Judah, when you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, then I'll come back, right? And not a day before. And so look, I'm not here to tell you that the Jews get it all right. I'm not going to say that. Okay, but God loves the Jewish people, and they are incredibly important and central to this story. And we are all dependent on them to finally say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. All right. I can say it all day long. In fact, I say it a lot of time. I'm like, Lord, just come on back. And he's like, yeah, I heard you, Doug, but I'm not coming back till those guys say it. And I'm like, that's not fair. But that's just how it is, right? Because that's how he has set up this whole thing. And so, we know in the book of Hosea that he's going to go away and he's going to come back in your tribulation. Then you will earnestly seek me. Okay. And, sadly, it's going to take something like the tribulation for the leadership of Judah to finally put 2 and 2 together. And it's like, oh, Jesus is the Messiah. Yeah. Right. But they are going to figure it out. And, will they make some mistakes along the way? Probably. I mean,
I would say they don't figure it out until they actually, because it says they will look to or upon him.
They'll look to him. Yep.
And I personally, I believe that is the sign of the Son of Man that Yeshua mentions. In other words, that there will be like some, however Yeshua chooses to do it. I mean, he created the universe. So however he chooses to reveal himself to them, I believe that's happening simultaneously as the resurrection is occurring on that Yom Teruah. And then Maria, this is something I think all of us would agree with on that during that 10-day period between then and Judgment Day or Yom Kippurim,
right?
Judah will miraculously repent, and then Judah, these are going to be individuals that are not going to be caught up. They're not going to be to receive their immortal bodies at that time. They're going to be part of the natural human seed pool that goes into the 7th day or the millennium, Revelation 3 millennium.
Right. I believe that
we all agree on.
The foolish virgins. I used to think the foolish virgins were lost forever, right? But as I began to examine that parable, first of all, you got to look at why there are 5 of each, right? 5 is the number of Torah, 5 books, right? So there's 5 that have the oil and the other 5 that don't. Both of them are virgins, but virgins means that they are undefiled by the mother harlot system, right? People think it's male virgins. That's not what's being described there. It's talking about that they have kept themselves undefiled by the mother harlot, like Queen Jezebel, who came into Israel and polluted the whole land with Baal worship. So they're undefiled. But the only difference is one group has the oil and the other group does not. Well, what is the oil? Of course, it's the Holy Spirit. But if you go to Song of Solomon 1:3, it actually says your name is like oil poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love you. So it's the name. Now, I'm not going to say which name. Now, some people say Yeshua. I say Yahushua. Some people still say Jesus. Whatever. Getting down to the nitty gritty of what that means, it could just mean that you've identified who the Messiah is. You know what I'm saying? That you're seeking that relationship with Yahushua. And so the wise virgins know him by name because they're intimate with him. Whereas the foolish, they're keeping Torah. That's why they've got the number 5 associated with them. They're obedient to the Torah, but they're missing the oil. My theory is that the foolish virgins are the same ones that are mentioned as the one of Smyrna, the congregation of Smyrna, because he tells them, he says to Smyrna, I know your works, but he never says to them, you've not denied my name. But then to Philadelphia, he gives them 2 accolades. He says, number 1, you've obeyed my word. That's keeping Torah. But then he also says, you've not denied my name. So they've got the double portion. Not only do they keep Torah, but they also know him by name, which means they have that intimacy, right? So they have the open door that no man can shut. So I believe the ones of Philadelphia are correlate to the wise virgins, and they get to go on Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, after the 1,260 days of the ministry of the two witnesses is finished. That's when they get caught up. But then the ones that have to suffer tribulation for 10 days, that's Smyrna. And I believe those are the foolish virgins. They go buy the oil because the wise virgin said, no, go buy your own oil. So I believe that during those 10 days of awe, they're actually going to go buy the oil. And so
Maria,
then, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think it's coincidental at all that on this 7 stick menorah right here that it's church number 2 and church number 6.
Yes,
that receive the good reports and no negative reports. In other words, they're linked on this menorah, and if you turn it upside down, it forms a circle. If you put one on top of it, but I just don't. And I picked that up from Halisa. And I believe she's 100% correct on that understanding as far as how they're linked, and even some of the feast days may be linked. But what's your thoughts on that, Doug? As far as Judah and Maria, I know from reading your blogs, listening to you, talking to you, that you believe that that natural Judah, in other words, that they're going to be still within their natural bodies, part of the kingdom, part of the humans that are inhabiting the millennium and repopulating the millennium, that they're sort of going to be the human bride of Yeshua. And you've linked that up. I think you've done a good job. Maybe that it's actually on topic because it deals with Judah, and something that will be specifically fulfilled maybe just with the house of Judah, perhaps at that time, and those that repent during those 10 days. Because I don't think it'll just be Judah that repents. I believe there's going to be a lot of repenting going on in that 10-day period.
Right.
By those who have not taken the mark and worship the image of the beast. Explain to the audience your understanding and how that relates in with Leah and Rachel. Doug, I think you'll like this. Right.
Okay, so something I've noticed is, and I hear a lot of people within Hebraic roots or Netzarim or whatever you want to call it, they say that Isaiah 66 hasn't happened yet, right? This is their argument. But if you go to Isaiah 66:7, and it says, before she travailed, okay, not after she travailed, before she travailed. That word travailed is the same word for tribulation. It's, it has to do with tribulation. Before she travailed, this is talking about Jerusalem, she brought forth, before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. And then as you keep reading, it says, who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day, or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. Well, I believe this is talking about 1948, that the rebirth of the nation of Israel was in 1948. But some people will contend, oh no, that's for us. That's for us born again people. That's still for the future. Well, I believe there's actually 2 regatherings. And just like I believe there's 2 different groups of 144,000. So stay with me on this. I believe that the 144,000 that are mentioned in Revelation 7, they have a different set of characteristics than the 144,000 that are mentioned in Revelation 14. So in the ones in Revelation 7, all it says about them is that they're given a seal in the foreheads, and that's all it says about them. Nothing else. Then you go to Revelation 14, suddenly is a different set of characteristics. It says that they have their father's name, not just a seal, but they have their father's name in their foreheads. And it says that they follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and they've not defiled themselves with, it says women, plural, but the word is gune in Greek, which means a woman. So it's the woman, the mother harlot system. So I believe that the ones in Revelation 7 are the ones that began returning to the land in 1948. But the ones in Revelation 14 are all those that are born again by the blood of the Lamb, that by the time Messiah returns, they're going to be caught up to meet him in the air on Yom Teruah. But the ones from Revelation 7, those ones have been given a seal in the foreheads ahead of time for the day of redemption, because Yahushua knows they are going to accept him when he lands his feet on the Mount of Olives. He knows they're not going to take the mark of the beast. So he gives them a seal ahead of time. And it's the same seal that's talked about in Ezekiel chapter 9. They're given the Tav.
Maria, my question was specifically about the
yes,
the typology of Rachel and Leah.
Right.
That's what I think the audience would find fascinating too. Not that wasn't good, but
well, yeah. So when I started doing a study on the meanings of the names of the churches in Revelation or the assemblies, I don't like to say the word church because, the association of the Circe, the goddess of, the goddess Kirky or whatever. Anyway, so the name Smyrna means strengthened for myrrh. And the name Philadelphia, as we know, it means brotherly love, right? Well, Esther, if you look in the book of Esther, it said that Esther had to go through this purification ritual for 6 months with myrrh. Okay, with myrrh. Now, when you look at the name Rachel, her name means lamb, but her handmaiden is Bila, and Bila means tribulation or trouble. Okay, but then you look at Leah, and her name means weak-eyed, but it also can mean cow. Okay, it means a cow. So, but then her handmaiden is Zilpah, and Zilpah's name means dripping with myrrh. Dripping with myrrh. So what I see is there's a correlation between Philadelphia, who has the oil. They're the wise virgins that have the oil, and they're like Leah because Leah got married first, right? She's the firstborn daughter of Laban. She gets married first. She's counted as the firstborn, and then her handmaiden are like her Gentile companions. You know how in Ezekiel 37, it talks about the house of Judah and their companions, and then it talks about the house of Ephraim and their companions. So both groups have Gentile companions who grab their tzitzits and follow them, right? And so it's the same here. You've got Philadelphia, I believe, correlates to Leah and, their companions, which would be like her handmaiden Zilpah. They're dripping with myrrh. They've got the oil, right? But now you've got the foolish virgins who correlate to Smyrna. They're keeping Torah, but they're missing the oil. But during those 10 days of all, they go by the oil of his name, and they recognize, oh, it was him all along. It was Yahushua, who many call Jesus. We didn't recognize him. We thought the Messiah was coming for the first time.
Well,
but
there's Zechariah being mourn. They will mourn.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, they're going to. When that passage is being fulfilled, they will look to him whom they pierced. Mm-hmm. They will mourn. They will see Yah doing these great things, saving Jerusalem. All the nations are coming against Jerusalem and Judah. And again, in those passages, Doug and I talked about it before I think earlier today. You do see, or maybe it was another friend of mine, you do see like it talks about the bow of Ephraim will be put down. In other words, there will be Judah and Ephraim will no longer need the weapons of war. You do see Joseph mentioned, the house of Joseph mentioned earlier in Zechariah, but then again, in those final 3 chapters of Zechariah, it only mentions the house of Judah and the house of David, which the house of David is a synonym for the house of Judah. If you go back and study Kings, we're not going to follow the house. We're not of the house of David. I mean, that's essentially a synonym for the house of Judah. And that's why I get so frustrated, back to sort of the original topic. These passages, they have not been fulfilled yet. And I do not believe 1948 and the Jewish state becoming a nation fulfilled prophecy, but it set the table for prophecy to be fulfilled. In other words, they had to come back for prophecy to be fulfilled.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I would agree with you that it's not a closed fulfillment, but I think it's the beginning of the fulfillment.
Okay.
And so I think if we can kind of just clarify those things, because
setting the stage.
You and I have sort of we've hashed this out, and I'm like, I think it is, and you're like, no, it's not. But I think if we understand that, I don't think that it's that was it and it's done. I would say that 1948 was the beginning of that prophecy, and then it's going to play out.
Are we both thinking of the same passage in Isaiah 66 with the
Yeah, well, I think it was the reason why I think that was that fulfillment is a different one than from Revelation 12. They're very similar, but the woman Jerusalem gives birth before the tribulation, before she travails, okay? But then the one in Revelation 12 gives birth after the tribulation. So I believe there's that little bit of difference there, that the ones from 1948 that started coming back to the land, I believe those are the natural born. Abraham had two kinds of seed, the ones that are the sands on the seashore, those are the natural branches. And then he had the stars of the heavens, that's the wild branches, right? So I believe the ones that represent the natural branches, the ones that represent the sands on the seashore, they started coming back to the land in 1948. And that's who I believe Revelation 7 is talking about. But then when you go to Revelation 14, I believe those are the ones that are the stars of the heavens. They're born again. They're the spiritual descendants, the ones that are the stars of the heavens, the wild branches.
And Doug, can you pull up Isaiah 66 real quick, verse 12?
Sure.
Yeah. And so I believe that 1948 was a partial fulfillment, right, of Isaiah 66, but then there's still yet another fulfillment of that in Revelation 12,
Well, and again, I am not saying that Judah being gathered in unbelief did not set the stage. In other words, it had to set the stage. I believe, again, it was a major sign that we're approaching the end of the age. But the reason I asked him to pull this verse up, and Maria, as I'm prone to do on Facebook with your blogs and stuff, and sometimes, I differ with you. This is the reason I differ with both of you on the nation state of Israel, the current nation state, not fulfilling that prophecy about a nation being born in a day. I believe that's at the very end, is this verse, because we have to keep reading. I will extend shalom to her like a river, and the glory of the nations like a flowing stream. Then you shall feed on sides, you shall be carried and be dandled on her knees. In other words, Jerusalem at this time, look what they have never enjoyed true peace. And we know that no matter what is worked out with the Saudis, what happens after this war or the next war, that Jerusalem will truly never enjoy peace until the Prince of Peace returns. And back to that Zechariah passage, Judah will no longer have to have Iron Dome or Iron Shield. They will no longer have to have the IDF. We will not need missiles and missile defense systems. We will not need tanks anymore. And so again, that's where I 100% agree that Judah being gathered back set the stage for Isaiah 66 to be fulfilled, and mainly for Zechariah 12-14 to be fulfilled, as it's specifically a Judah-centric prophecy, as opposed to and we know not all of Judah's back. A lot of Jews still live in America, South America, all over the world. And Doug, the first passage you pulled up mentioned Ephraim and those dispersed of Judah.
Yeah.
There's going to be a total regathering at that time.
The regathering is what some people call the rapture, you call the zapture. But it's going to happen in conjunction with the second coming. That is when Jesus is going to send out his angels to gather his elect from the four corners of the earth. It's a parallel passage to Isaiah 11:12. And so that will be the complete fulfillment of
here's
this
why
regathering. And I think we have one second. So we have a partial fulfillment of that. Today there are people back in the land. That's pretty significant after some 2,000 years. That's pretty huge. Now, Jason asked a question. He says, rebirth of Israel by man, Rothschild, and not Yahweh himself, like all throughout the Old Testament, when they were dispersed over and over for disobedience. So Jason, what I would suggest is that, God has used a lot of bad people over the years. He used Nebuchadnezzar to do some pretty amazing things, who eventually became a true believer, as far as I can tell. But, when he was attacking Jerusalem, he was not at all a believer. And yet God calls him his servant. He also talks about Cyrus being his servant, right? So God can use ungodly people to still do things that are on his agenda. And that's the cool thing about God.
What I
he's
would
not
like to
limited.
share is that Ezekiel laying on his side, on his right side for Judah and his left side for the house of Israel or Ephraim, that actually ended in 1948. And I'll explain. So in Ezekiel 4:4-6, it says that the prophet was told to lay on his side for 430 days, representing 430 years of iniquity upon Israel. But he also promised, Yahuwah promised that he was going to gather Israel out of all countries and that he would bring them back into their own land again. That's Ezekiel 36:24. True to prophecy, the people were taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, in 606 BC. That's in Daniel chapter 1. The Babylonian captivity lasted for 70 years as prophesied in Jeremiah 25:11, ending in 536 BC. That's Ezra chapter 1. At the conclusion of the Babylonian captivity, 360 years remained of the 430 years prophesied by Ezekiel. However, Israel did not repent of her sins. Only 50,000 people returned at the end of the 70 years. That's in Ezra 2:64-65. Most of Israel chose not to return with Zerubbabel at that time. Now, in Leviticus 26:18, Elohim warned that if Israel did not repent, or if they continued in their sins, that their punishment would be multiplied 7 times. So when the remaining 360 years is multiplied by 7, the punishment extends to 2,520 years. Now, based on a 360-day year, that's what the prophetic, calendar is based on, a 360-day year. If you take 2,520 years of 360 days, that's 907,200 days. Now, based on our Gregorian calendar of 365 days, that's 2,483 years, 9 months, and 21 days. Adding this period to the date of the decree of King Cyrus takes us to exactly May 14th, 1948. That's the reason I say this was a fulfillment, in my opinion, because how perfectly it landed that their punishment ended on May 14th, 1948. But you apply the same mathematical equation to Jerusalem, and it ended exactly on June 7th, 1967. That was the conclusion of the 6-day war in which Israel, for the first time since 517 BC, regained Jerusalem. So you can't say, oh, but that was just a coincidence. The math doesn't lie. And that's why I say, based on this mathematical equation, Ezekiel's prophecy was fulfilled to the exact date of May 14th, 1948 and June 7th, 1967. That's why I say I do believe Isaiah 66 was a partial intermediate fulfillment of the first regathering of the natural born children of Abraham, the sands on the seashore. And yet there's still yet another regathering for those that represent the stars of the heavens. And that's still in the future.
So Jason has a follow-up question. How did their punishment end in 1948?
Because, like I said, Ezekiel was told to lay on his side for a total of 430 days, representing 430 years. But when they returned, there was only a 360 days left out of the days that he was supposed to be laying on his side. The 360 days, or the 360 years, I should say, 360 years remained out of the 430 years. But in Leviticus 26, it says that if they continue in sin, their punishment is multiplied times 7. So the remainder of years, which is 360 times 7, amounts to 2,520 years. So the punishment lasted for that long. If you add that period to when they were taken captive, by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, it lands, their punishment ends on May 14th, 1948.
And you're talking
See
about the
that?
punishment as far as the exile from the land.
Yes.
That was his question. So, according to that, and I like your explanation, the punishment would have ended. The punishment was that you'll be dispersed from your land, and now that has essentially ended.
Right.
Have you done the calculations for when our punishment ends, Maria? Is around 2028-ish?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that if you go by the fig tree prophecy, and Yahushua said, this generation, how did he word it? He said, when you see the fig tree begin to blossom, he says, this generation shall not pass right until all these things are fulfilled. Well, in Psalms 90, verse 10, it tells us a generation is anywhere from 70 to 80 years at the most. So if you add 80 years to 1948, that takes us to 2028. However, we have to go by the 360-day year versus the 365-day year.
We're already past 70, and we're probably past 80 by now.
Right. But also taking into account the changes that Pope Gregory made with the Gregorian calendar, I would say sometime between 2027 and 2028. Of course, I believe he's coming back on a Yom Kippur. When he lands his feet on the Mount of Olives, that's going to be on a Yom Kippur. So I'm looking at probably, and I'm not trying to date set here. I'm just speculating here based on the data. Josephus said that 23 BC was a Jubilee. He said that was the 79th Jubilee. So when you add 50 years to that, our Messiah began his ministry in 27 AD. You add 40 more Jubilees, that's 2,000 years. That takes us to Yom Kippur 2027. But, taking into consideration the Gregorian calendar changes and whatnot, I'm looking at maybe 2027 to 2028 Yom Kippur, maybe, for him to return. But like I said, I'm not setting any dates in stone. I'm just speculating.
Right now, that would be your best understanding, but you're not saying go sell everything and get up on the top of the mountain and wait until Yeshua returns on Yom Kippur in 2027. You're right. Like me. I mean, again, I believe he's coming back between 27-ish and 33-ish, but I'm not teaching it and setting a date unless and until we all see, no doubt, by golly, the abomination of desolation. Mm-hmm. There is a mark of the beast implemented. I can no longer buy and sell. And essentially, over time, my faith will get me killed unless I'm supernaturally protected or I'm actually able to live off grid, and I'm just not able to do that.
Right. So when I saw this calculation about Ezekiel's prophecy and their punishment ending on May 14th, 1948, it totally changed my perspective, because I realized, yes, this is a supernatural thing that they became a nation again in 1948. What are the odds of the math adding up so precisely? You know what I mean? I mean, it's you can't say, oh, it's done by the Rothschilds, like as if Yahuwah is just, he fell off his throne, right? And the Rothschilds are in control, like they know, like they can outsmart or outwit Yahuwah. Come on,
right?
That there's no amount of secular government.
Well, and let me underscore that what you're saying. So John chapter 11. The Jews were the leadership were looking for a way to kill Jesus. And so it was the high priest who said it's better that one man should die for the nation. He was speaking in the office of high priest, and he actually made a very true prophecy, right? That God would use that event to bring about the restoration or the regathering of all the children of Israel. And we should not forget that in Psalm 118, it says the stone that the builders have rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and this is marvelous in our eyes, right?
Right.
And every time I read that, I just kind of get choked up a little bit, because I'm like, wow, that's really amazing. That God, in his sovereignty, in ways that we don't understand, even though people are making their own choices and everyone's responsible for what they do, but God also is doing stuff, right? And we cannot forget that God is on the throne, which is what you were just saying. God is on the throne. He's not being, his plans are not being thwarted by the Rothschilds, or he's like, oh man, I didn't think of that one.
He uses the wealth of the wicked.
He's using them. Exactly. God is using them. He's outfoxing them. He's allowing them to do their dirty deeds, and he's like, "Fine, I can live. I can work with that."
The divine counsel appointment. Hold on, Maria. The divine counsel part, where the spirit, whoever this being was in the heavenly host, that said, "Let me go down and put a lying spirit into the mouths of the prophets to give this person bad information." And again, these demons, these entities, these powers and principalities, they can do nothing unless Yah allows it. Period. They they cannot manipulate the Rothschilds or the Pope or the Jesuits, the Black Pope. They can, these entities that I do believe these individuals worship, they can do nothing without the permission of their creator, as well as our creator.
So in Isaiah 53:10, it says that it pleased Yahuwah to bruise his son. It pleased him to bruise his son. But then when you go to Corinthians, Paul says that if the demonic entities had known, they would never have crucified the Lord of glory. So it's like, wait a minute. In Isaiah 53, it says Yahuwah, the Father's the one who crucified his own son, or it pleased him to bruise his own son. But then in Corinthians, it says that if the demonic entities would have known, they would have never crucified the Lord of glory. So which is it? Was it the Father or was it the demonic entities? Well, I say both. Because the Father, it was his doing, but he uses the demonic forces he even uses the devil to fulfill his purposes, right?
Yeah. He's the ultimate martial artist, where you use your opponent's weight against himself, to
another passage on this for these nonsensical Hebrew uprooters. Romans 11, it's like they don't read it. For as you also, Romans 11:30, for as you also at one time disobeyed Elohim, but now have obtained compassion through and he's talking about natural Israel, Judah's disobedience, so also they now have disobeyed, that through the compassion shown you, they also might obtain compassion. For God, Elohim, has shut them all up to disobedience. So again, who are we blaming here? In order to have compassion on all. Oh, the depth, and like you were talking about, Doug, how we can't understand this in his sovereignty, how he's working all this out in his sovereign plan, and yet we also have choice. The depth of riches and the wisdom and knowledge of Elohim, how unsearchable his judgments and untraceable his ways. For who has known the mind of Yah, or who has become his counselor? Or who first gave to him, and it shall be given back to him, because of him and through him and to him are all, and to whom be esteemed glory forever. Amen. Again, it's like these people can't read. Martin Luther, it was like there's, and you put, and Doug, you used to feel so sorry for the Jews, and we would read that passage earlier, that the partial hardening has happened to all Israel. And it's not just Judah that has been partially hardened and partially blind and partially deaf. Right. And the fact, Maria, you started coming to this and seeing this after 9/11. Doug, I think it was around 2012, 2013?
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
Mine was 2017. I don't think it's because, the three of us put together any smarter than John Calvin. The guy was a genius, but he was dumb as a rock as to understanding that he was grafted into Israel. And it wasn't, it's not, but it's because, again, per that passage and other passages, it wasn't time yet. It
wasn't time. Exactly.
That's right.
It wasn't.
And this is what cracks me up about people in this movement now, right? Because what they don't understand is, like in the parable of the vineyard, the owner of the land, ever since the attacks on Gaza for the last 2 weeks or so, I've been seeing all kinds of people on Facebook saying Israel's the people, not the land. And I'm like, do you even pick up your Bible and read it? Like they say it's just the people, it's not the land. But the parable of the vineyard shows that the owner of the land is the Father himself. He sends servants, and then he finally sends his son, and they beat up these servants, and then they finally kill the heir and saying, we're going to take the land for ourselves. But see, he's using the wicked people because when he comes back, it says he's going to utterly destroy those wicked servants, right? So in other words, he's laying a trap for them. He used the Rothschilds' money because it tells us in Proverbs 13:22 that the wealth of the wicked has been laid up for the just.
I love
So
that.
he uses their wealth
Yep.
and says, I'm going to let them expend all their wealth and they're going to buy my land back for me. And then when I come back, I get to seek vengeance on them. And I'm going to destroy those wicked servants who stole my land, or at least they thought they stole it. But see, it's always been his all along. It's not like, he forfeited his land and said, I'm just going to let the Rothschilds have it. Like, he's chosen to place his name there. 7 times it says in scripture that Jerusalem is the place where I have chosen to place my name there forever.
Hey, I want to get y'all both of your thoughts. First, you, Doug. What about these?
What?
I'm not going to call them idiots this time. I'm going to say, what about these individuals that say that these prophecies about Jerusalem are all about the New Jerusalem? In other words, it's not talking about the. I don't know how they get it, and Ken, the guy that we debated with, Doug, with Sean Griffin, the guys that think that the Father is a cosmic baby daddy of Jesus. It's true. That's what they teach. And that Jesus is the eternal butcher in heaven cooking up meals for the daddy God. But he believes this nonsense. Mystery Babylon, by the way, is the Death Star as well. So, but what would be your counter to, I guess, scripturally and linking them together to say that no, this by no means is speaking of, like, when Zechariah 12-14 are fulfilled, or when all the nations are gathered to the valley of Jehoshaphat for judgment, that's speaking of the New Jerusalem, because they don't want, again, these guys also are very anti-Judah. They're very conspiracy minded, that this is just a Rothschild created state. It's Illuminati, it's pure evil. These are all fake, So they've now put Jerusalem into the future and New Jerusalem. It's like they've got this all happening in the Revelation 20 end times Gog and Magog war. And it makes no sense to me. I don't even know how they get there. And how
I don't even understand that the New Jerusalem doesn't even come down until the 8th millennium.
Yeah,
because that's well, I mean,
that's a different topic. But
yeah,
so Scott, help me understand. What is it that they're actually arguing?
Like, for instance, these prophecies in Zechariah 12-14 we've been discussing, in which the nations are being gathered against Jerusalem. They have this being the New Jerusalem. Now, none of these individuals I've ever asked this question to: where is Ephraim? Where is Israel? Where is the house of Joseph in these prophecies? Show me. We're not gathered until the end. Until Judah looks to him whom they pierced. And they somehow have made these prophecies all like not occurring until like the New Jerusalem comes down. It's like they don't want the current Jerusalem to have anything to do with prophecy, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
so they white it out.
Well, I think I would say that they're, obviously very wrong, but it talks about these things are going to happen where the Lord was crucified. So I don't think that, you can argue that the Lord was crucified in the New Jerusalem. That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. That's Revelation 11, chapter 6, where it says where our master was crucified. Right.
So it will be on this iteration of the New Jerusalem, and not not Mount Zion, the heavenly mountain, God's mountain.
So I want to propose that the reason why we keep Sukkot, one of the reasons I should say, is that these 7 days of the first 7 days of Sukkot is a microcosm of the 7 millennia. But then on the 8th day, we stop dwelling in temporary shelters, right? And so the 8th day, which is called Lashana Rabbah, or the last great day. That is a prophetic picture of the 8th millennium after the 7,000 years. Because after the 7,000 years is when Satan is released out of the bottomless pit. He's given one more chance to deceive the nations, and then after that, that's when the new heaven and the new earth comes down.
Let's put that one out for a future day. That'd be a good topic.
Yeah, we can talk about that next time.
I agree with you and Doug's wrong.
But okay, so okay,
I take a different position on that, but that's okay.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because everybody's jumping the gun with the New Jerusalem, and they're acting like, as soon as Yahushua comes back, as soon as Messiah comes back, he's bringing New Jerusalem with him.
Who else thinks that? I would love to have another person.
Sean Griffin, the guy that we had the debate with. And
that's a bummer.
Listen to his channel. I'm sorry.
I don't want him as an ally.
I believe that the restoration of all things is this gradual. I believe the restoration of all things is like this gradual process where
that requires its own show. That's all I can say.
I know.
We'll have you back on for that one, Maria. Me and you and Doug, okay. Maybe find an ally.
That'd be fun because.
But yeah, I mean, it's the other thing about the land that it cracks me up is that they say, this is what I hear people saying: the state of Israel is not the true Israel, but I'm grafted into Israel. Right? That's what they say. But what cracks me up about that is that in Ephesians 2:12 through 19. Paul says we're called the commonwealth of Israel, right? When you look at that word commonwealth, politia in Greek, it means a community. It means a citizenship. So if you're grafted into Israel, but you say it's not the true Israel, then what are you grafted into? Well, I mean, trees have to be planted into soil, aka land. So if you're a wild branch grafted into the natural branch of the olive tree, well, the natural branch can't survive unless it's planted into soil. So, I mean, it's a silly argument to say, oh, Israel's just the people, but it's not the land. But how about Isaiah 62:4, where he says, you shall no more be termed forsaken, neither shall your land be termed desolate, but you shall be called Hephzibah, and your land Beulah, for Yahuwah delights in you, and your land shall be married. Well, how's the land going to be married if it's not the land anymore? It's just the people. Like it's crazy.
It's a both and that would be an example. The gentleman I talked about that we had the debate with, Sean and Ken, they actually teach that this covenant and this promise is only about the land. It's yet to be fulfilled. In other words, when Yeshua returns and gathers us back, then that is when the covenant is fulfilled, because we get the land. There's no marriage. Jesus actually marries New Jerusalem. In other words, that they actually teach that the bride is the city of New Jerusalem, but cities are just bricks. And obviously this is going to be a very glorious city. But as I pointed out in that debate, did Samaria and Jerusalem, the cities, the sewer systems, the buildings, the streets, did they sin against Yah, or was it the people of Samaria and Jerusalem that committed adultery and harlotry towards Yah? In other words, Yeshua is not going to come back to marry a bride that's that's an inanimate object. Right. And so it's a both and. So is Israel the land or the people? Yes.
Both.
It's definitely both. Yes. New York City is the land, the place, and the infrastructure, right? It's right. You can't have one without the other.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of out of time. I want to take one more question because I think this one is really super important because there's a huge misunderstanding that people have, and this is from Sales Talk. Doug, Scott, Maria, important question. Where do you sit with the Star of Remphan being on the flag of Israel? I think this is a vital question that many avoid. So I take this head on in my book, Corrupting the Image, Volume 2. All right. So what you're looking at there is Ishtar, or Inanna. She is the queen of heaven. And if you guys take a really close look there, I'll see if I can't magnify that a bit. But there are 8 points on her stars. Okay, 8 points. Now, Remphan, she and Nimrod had they both had stars on their on their stuff. Let's just say that for now. Okay, they had 8 pointed stars on their various designs. Here's another one. This is actually Ninurta or Nimrod. Okay, and he has here you can see there he's got a star. It's an 8 pointed star. Here's Ninurta again. He's got 8 pointed stars. I know that sometimes the resolution is not so easy to see it, but in the book I show those. So an 8 pointed star is definitely not a 6 pointed star. The other thing is the word Remphan is really a misnomer. This is something that was completely missed. This is coming from the word Kiyun or Kivan, another way to look at that, which is coming from Amos 9:26, which is what Stephen is quoting from. And he's talking about a pair of gods, Siyun or Sikun and Kivan. And the word Kivan, if you think about how it's written in Hebrew, so you have a kaf, and if you don't bring that little foot down, you just kind of don't write it all the way, it can turn into a resh very easily. And so that's what happened, is there was a mis transcription of this word, so that it, instead of it being a kaf, it actually became a resh. And then you can see how you go from Kivun to Remphan. There is no God Remphan. I want to make that abundantly clear. There's no such God as Remphan. But it's actually talking about this pair, Sikut and Kiyun, which we know is are just two different titles for Nimrod or Ninurta. All right, and Ninurta's star was an 8-pointed star. And another thing is what we call the Star of David is, again, a misnomer, because that's not what it is in Hebrew. It's actually Magen David. So it's the shield of David. It's not the Star of David. Right. So it, this whole idea that, well, we can't support Israel because they have a pagan symbol on their flag. It's wrong on every count. Right? It's just wrong.
Exactly.
And and as far as the ancient star or the Magen David, we actually do have that from like the 1st century. There was a synagogue in the area of Kfar Nahum or Capernaum, where they actually had that, right? It was
some
definitely
graphics.
Not the star. Yeah.
Can I show the back up what you're saying, Doug?
Sure.
So I made these graphics, right? So this graphic says, can you see it?
Yep.
The 8-pointed star of Remphan / Ishtar versus the 6-pointed star of Jacob on the pomegranate in Numbers 24:17. The Star of Jacob is a prophecy of our Messiah. So I'll get into that a little bit more, but this is the Star of Ishtar. Like you said, it's the 8-pointed star. It's even on the ancient Iranian flag. Now, the flag of Iran doesn't have that anymore, but at one time it did. This is the 8-sided octagon on the Temple Mount Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's an 8-pointed star. This right here, just like you said, Doug, it's the 8-pointed star of Ishtar. Now, the temple design, Yahuwah told Moses to put the little pomegranates on the bottom of the priestly garments. There'd be a pomegranate and a bell, a pomegranate and a bell. Well, the crown on top of the pomegranate is a picture of Messiah's kingship. All the stems on top of pomegranates have a 6-pointed star. And as you said, David's shield, they found these in archaeological digs. David had his battle shields made with his monogram because his name begins and ends with a letter D, which in Hebrew is a dalet. Well, the dalet in Paleo was a triangle. So 2 interlocking dalets looks like 2 interlocking letter Ds.
That's right. And let me just underscore that with in Greek, you have the delta, right? And what is a delta? It's where a river spreads out into basically a triangle, if you will, right? And so to underscore what you're saying. So go on.
Now, this is the Shiloh pomegranate. They found the ceramic pomegranates. Of course, they're broken and everything, but these little pomegranates were on the hem of the priestly garment, and they all have 6-pointed stars on top. So there's a number of times where Yahuwah tells Moses to use the pomegranate as a decoration for the temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, the devil doesn't own pomegranates, right? Here's another one. Because I've been seeing this go around all week long on Facebook, and I took the same meme and I actually tweaked it. But people are saying, show me in the Bible where it says the Star of David, where it's, so what I did was I showed the shield of David 7 times. It speaks about David's shield in scripture. And I've got all the scripture verses here. 1 Samuel 17, 41 through 45, 2 Samuel, yada, yada, yada. I've got all the scriptures here. And then look at the tent of the door to the tent is shaped like a triangle. See that? Mm-hmm. So whenever it talks about the tent door, how the Paleo Hebrew letter Dalet means the door, it's talking about a tent door, like a flap, right? And Yahushua says, I am the door of the sheep. So the 6-pointed star is actually a prophetic picture of our Messiah. He is the door. He's the door that goes from heaven to earth. And also, he's the one who ascends to heaven. He's the one that descends, who gathers the wind in his fists,
Let's be clear. Sorry, this is Gary Maria's husband. He's the door for both houses of Israel.
That's right.
Not just for one house.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a graphic I made. I think this is really compelling. But when you look at this prophecy in Numbers 24:17, he says, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not near. There shall come a star, and that word in Hebrew, kokab, out of Jacob, and a scepter, which is a branch, shall rise. That word rise, kum, can also mean to resurrect, out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Shet. Now look at this. The letters to Kokab, there's 4 letters, Kaf, Wa. Now I know you say Vav in modern Hebrew, but I say Wa, because that's the ancient way to say it. So
that's the German way to say it, but go ahead.
Well, actually, there was an archaeological dig in 2007, and it was on the Jerusalem Post. The guy's name was Joel. I forget his last name. But anyway,
go on. Let's not talk. But
it's actually the other way around. The Jewish Encyclopedia said it used to be a wall. Anyway. So Kokab, Kaf means open palm. The wall means the nail or the tent peg. And then there's another Kaf, open palm. And then the bet is the family or the house. So this word star, Kokab, spells out this message. He opened both palms, Kaf, to be nailed, wall, for both houses, bait of Israel. So in the word star, you have a narrative being painted for us that he opened both palms and he allowed himself to be nailed for both houses. Okay. And so this is the 6-pointed star on top of every pomegranate. So, the devil doesn't own these things. He hijacks them and he tries to.
Maria, real quick, somebody in chat had commented about, well, what about how the occult uses it? And again, Satan is a counterfeiter. He will take what is holy and pure and he will corrupt it.
I refuse to give the devil
no. But what I'm saying is he will do that. And that's what he does, because he can't create anything. He can only manipulate and twist. For example, as you and Doug have pointed out, he could, and as you're pointing out with the pomegranate, Satan didn't create the 6-pointed pomegranate the way it appears on top of the pomegranate. And so again, I don't take a hard position or stance either way. I'm not going to criticize Israel because they have a symbol. I believe this should have been the symbol, by the way. But for whatever reason, it was not. But at the same point in time, I think it's a lot to do with modern society and the internet, TikTok, Facebook, social media generation. They see something, they don't really do the research as Doug had done in his book, and as you have done. And so they read something, and then the next thing you know, it's gospel truth amongst the Hebrew uprooter messianic crowd.
Mm-hmm. Right. They don't do a deep dive. They just copy off of everybody else. It's just like a bunch of parrots parroting what everybody says, and it's like, show the graphic here. There's one about the lily. The lily has 6 petals on it also. And Yahushua is called the lily of the valley. How many can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. So 5 times in scripture, we have the 6-pointed lily that describes they were used as ornaments in the temple as well as a symbol of Messiah, in 1 Kings 7:19. Also in Song of Solomon 2:1, it says, I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys. And then in Song of Solomon 2:2, as the lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. And then in Hosea 14:5, I will be as the dew unto Israel. He shall grow up as the lily and cast forth his roots as Lebanon. All lilies have 6 points on them. None of them have more than 6 or less than 6. 6 points.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, people just need to understand that the devil can't, just because the devil hijacks something doesn't mean he owns it now. And so we're not going to give him the credit for things that Yahuwah created, just like the rainbow. Who in their right mind would say, well, the LGBT community took it, so now it belongs to them? Who in their right mind would say that? Nobody. We all know Yahuwah is the one that created it. He owns it. He had first dibs on it. He's the creator of it. So we're not going to give the devil credit for that.
Well said. Yeah. Yeah. Mark is still wondering, where in the Bible does it say there's a star on his breastplate? Well, Mark,
no, it's called a shield.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Mark, maybe you're not listening. It's not a shield. I mean, it is a shield. It's not a star. And as far as, Remphan and his star, he did have a star, but it was 8-pointed, which is absolutely proven historically. Just go look it up. I mean, go look up. First of all, there's no god Remphan. It's actually Sikut and Kiyun, all right, from Amos 9:26, also known as Molech. And he had an 8-pointed star. Okay, so there you go. Right?
So I've got this graphic I made this past week. It shows 7 times. I had it. I just lost it here. Yeah, 7 times it shows in scripture David's shield. Okay. 1 Samuel 17:41, the shield, David, and the man that bare the shield, Magan. So you've got David's shield mentioned 7 times. Yep. And, these, like I said, the Paleo Hebrew letter Dalet is equivalent to our English letter D. So D and D is the first and last letter of David's name. That's why he put the monogram on the shield. And the D represents the door. Messiah said, I am the door. And he's the door that ascends to heaven and the other door that descends to heaven. We're told in Proverbs 30, verse 4, what is his name and what is his son's name? Who is the one who ascends and descends? Ephesians 4:8-9 says that he ascended, he descended into the lower parts of the earth that he might give gifts unto men, who is also the one that ascended to the Father. So this is what the 2-letter D's represent, the 2 dalets, the door and the door to the Father, the door to the door to heaven, the door to the earth, the door for both houses of Israel. But see, the devil hijacked this and now he uses it for occult purposes. And he's got everybody convinced that he's the creator. And it's not right. We shouldn't let the devil deceive us into thinking, oh, he created these things.
If only the adversary hadn't outsmarted Yahuwah.
Yeah.
And real quick, somebody's having trouble with me saying messianics. I am only talking about those that are calling fake Jews. In other words, those that now say they're messianic. And the topic for the day are those idiots and morons that are saying that Israel and everybody that lives in the nation state of Israel are fake Jews. Okay. Right. And there are messianics, I'm sorry, and Hebrew uprooters that teach and believe and spew this dribble that would make Adolf Hitler proud. I am not talking about messianic Jews by any means, because the messianic Jews, a lot of them still think only the Jews are Israel. And I would have bone with them, but I'm not even calling.
Sometimes we've got to thread the needle here, and it's not always that easy. But just so we're very, very clear, we are pro House of Judah, we're pro House of Israel. We love the Jewish people. We don't think they get it all right, just like the church doesn't get it all right. Right. So what we're trying to address is say, hey guys, let's do a little more research. Let's not assume that the Jews are the bad guys, that they're going to bring about all kinds of bad stuff. They've got some issues, fair enough, but God loves them, and they are very central to his end times plan, and eventually the leadership of Judah is going to say Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. They're going to welcome Jesus in the name of Adonai. And man, we're out of time. We could keep going with all the comments all night, but
is there time for me to respond to this guy Mark that says that?
Yeah, let's take like maybe 30 seconds. So yeah.
Okay, so he says that that David didn't put triangles, or I forget what he said. He said something about the shield is not a triangle or something to that effect. I don't know. But look, this is in the Greek Strong's Concordance where Messiah says, I am the door. That word for door is the Greek word thyrios. And look what it says, a large shield as door-shaped, right? Now, in our modern times, we would go, a door isn't shaped like a triangle, but it's talking about the triangle, the door on a tent. The door on a tent looks like a flap, a triangular shaped flap on a tent door. That's what it's talking about. So the double D's, the double dalets, it's a door and a door, because David's name begins and ends with a Hebrew letter dalet. The Hebrew letter dalet is shaped like a triangle.
And dalet and delet sound almost the same. Part of the trouble is people that are often naysayers don't understand the Hebrew, and we don't have time to give a complete Hebrew lesson. But I think the bottom line for all of us is that let's be lovers of truth. Let's continue to pursue to learn. Let's be humble about the things that we don't know. And God has amazing ways of teaching us, and if we'll stay humble, then we can learn some amazing things. So, well, thank you guys. This is really awesome, fun as always. And thank you, Maria. You brought a lot of wonderful things, and I did not know that about the pomegranate. So that's really cool. So I definitely appreciate that. And just thank you so much for coming. Scott, as always, a lot of fun. And we will see you guys